What is the worst U.S. state and why? If you're curious about the historical underpinnings of Mississippi's abject suckfest of an existence, check out Rising Tide by John Barry. Basically, it wasn't actually populated until the mid to late 19th century, leading to a lack of infrastructure even compared to other southern states. After emancipation, Mississippi's paved the way in returning former slaves to servitude through sharecropping, and the complete absence of infrastructure, paired with laws mandating sharecroppers had written permission to leave the land they had been working, meant that sharecroppers were trapped and especially impoverished. I spent about 2 years in the region working all over and can say Alabama and Mississippi are kind of sad places. That's not to say there aren't some great people there, but dear God, are their state governments failing them hard. Mississippi just beats out Alabama, but both have a lot of room for improvement. I remember growing up thinking there wasn't that much racism anymore. Then I got down there where they still aren't even shy about it in places. It honestly feels like some of them are holding their states back just to hurt the black people more, even if it hurts them too. I've lived in Mississippi my whole life. I would like to leave, but won't because of aging parents. I want my son to know his grandparents, and I don't want them to get old and die alone. There are some good things about this state, but there are definitely plenty of bad things too. We are not all small-minded and hateful. There is a ton of good art and music. There are also highly educated and intelligent people here. We have some beautiful rivers and creeks, hardwood forests that have been doggedly protected, and quirky little pockets of charm. I am a teacher, and I see every day how poverty creates ignorance and crime. I teach young people that it doesn't have to be that way. The new generation of kids don't share past generations' views on race, gender, or sexuality. Anyway, that's all to say, I guess my state is the shittiest in the country, but I want to tell people that it's not all racism and bigotry. The minority is holding their line, and though change comes at a painfully slow pace here, I get some satisfaction in seeing it happen. It's like watching fragile, green shoots push their way upwards. I could choose to be cynical about being stuck here, but I'd rather put my energy into being part of the shift. Edit. Whoa, I was not expecting so much love. Yeah, all are awesome. When I checked back and saw all of your replies, my heart got fat and warm, and my eyes welled up. This made my day. Compared to Mississippi, Florida is really not that bad. Immigration decent. I lived in FL for over half my life. Can count the amount of racist interactions I've had on one hand. A few days in was and the last count after 5. The most unforgettable thing I heard, you Chinkongs aren't that bad, better than them NS at least. I just made a surprise Pikachu face. My brain couldn't even process what I just heard. 2 Italian men get on a bus. They sit down and engage in an animated conversation. The lady sitting behind them ignores them at first, but her attention is galvanized when she hears one of the men say the following: Emma come first, then I come. Then 2 asses come together. I come once more. 2 asses, they come together again. I come again and Pete twice. Then I come one last time. You foul-mouthed swine, retorted the lady indignantly. In this country we don't talk about our sex lives in public. Hey, cool it down lady, said the man, who talking about his exa. I'm just telling my friend how to spell a Mississippi. In Montana we have the highest DUI rate and the highest drunk driving deaths, one of the highest suicide rate in the U.S., and one of the worst mental health infrastructures. So without a doubt Mississippi. Edit. Since it keeps coming up, per capita, not tot hash s, we're 49th in the U.S. in pop density. How could it be total? https://www.tipple.org/div/state-no/popchart.html. Over the years, we swapped the Olympic gold for suicide rates W/Alaska and Wyoming. Sounds like Alaska is currently number 1, but by golly, 2021's not over yet. Yes, for 2 periods of time since 1955, Montana had no speed limit on interstates. It was instead called reasonable and prudent, and accident rates were actually lower during those times. Go figure. https://www.motorists.org/press/Montana no speed limit safety paradox/. As a 15-year trucker who's been to all 48 contiguous states, I can confidently say Mississippi. Update: I'm shut down for the night now. Was on break when I made the original comment. Understand that this is all subjective and based on personal experience as a truck driver. First off, any metro area sucks as far as most truckers are concerned. For me, there's just no endearing or redeeming quality about the state. From a trucker's perspective, most of the places we have available to park have little to no amenities or security. There are the major franchises, but a lot of those usually only look good on the outside. Not a whole lot of places where we feel safe parking, although Louisiana is a very close second. Some of the wildly wobbly roads cause my freight to shifter and slide despite me driving in a straight line. They usually don't actually fix roads. They just patch them up with asphalt repeatedly. When construction zones are finished and cleared, they'll leave the construction speed limit signs up so they can legally ticket you even though there's no more construction. They usually wait until the end of the month so they can make their quotas and everyone's guard is down. I've personally never seen this happen in another state. Customers, warehouses and the like, barely maintain their facilities since the state hardly seems to enforce anything, although I did see one in Jersey City that looked like it should have been condemned. Even places that are supposed to look nice, like offices, look drab and wholly depressing. Unless you're in one of the few more affluent areas. There's other things, but these are some that come immediately to mind. Have had a number of people ask the state I've liked the most. This is tough. For starters, I love driving in forested mountains. Many states have that. Northern California, Western Oregon and Washington, West Montana, Flathead Lake. Pennsylvania and all the Dutch architecture in the country, West Virginia, all mountain, but nowhere to park, etc. I just can't decide. Sorry. I also say Mississippi. I lived there in the late 1990s in the Delta area. I was shocked at how racist the town was. We were there for only a few years and were looking for a house to rent. We are white. We rented in the black side of town. We loved it, but no one would rent to us in the white side of town because they did not know us and were afraid we would mingle with black people. We were going to join a golf course. After complete the application, we were asked off the cuff if we associated with, terrible word with hard R, because we could not be members if we did. We told them to keep their application and we wanted no part of their club. I worked at a staffing temporary agency. I actually had a bank that called and needed a receptionist for a few weeks while theirs was out. The manager came out and said do not send me a hard R word again. I quit that job too. At the time we did not have children, but I was told there was a white school and a black school. I asked how in the world they could get away with that. I was told the white school is a private school and we keep the tuition high enough that the blacks can't afford it. I was so glad to get away from there. When I left, I wrote a very long detailed account of all that happened when we were there and sent it off to several major news agencies and begged them to do an investigative story. I did not get one reply. Edit: I really should be believed, because I have lived in a lot of the crappy ones. Ohio, Kentucky, Mississippi, Oklahoma. The better ones were North Carolina and Georgia and Virginia. Seriously though, any Okais here, or just anyone interested in Oklahoma history, should check out the book The Great Oklahoma Swindle by Russell Cobb. I've lived here my whole life and am fairly well educated and learned a lot about why Oklahoma is the way it is. He covers a lot of small, lesser-known towns too, like Ardmore and Tishomingo. It's a wealth of information and should be required reading for all Okais. I live in eastern Kentucky. I thought this region was more rural, had more poverty, meth etc. than any place in the U.S., but then I visited West Virginia, well the southeast part, and let me tell you that place was like going to a third world country. It was so bad. I worked in Colwood WV for a couple weeks. Nearest hotel, nearest anything was 50 miles on dogshit roads, an hour to anything. Sorry to the good people that are there if there is any still any, Abandoned homes and stores everywhere, like a ghost town. Trucks lined up on the side of this road with tanks getting water coming off the hillside. I assume they didn't have running water in their home. When I moved from Tennessee to Arkansas, that's exactly how I felt. I still remember the first time I drove from Little Rock, Arkansas to New Orleans, which is about the 6-7 hour drive. For the first hour, it's just interstate. Then that just ends, and you're driving through rural eastern Arkansas. Holy shit. It was so depressing. It was just farmland and abject poverty. Occasionally you'd pass through a town that had a cluster of houses, a gas station, and a McDonald's. It was an hour of this depressing shit. Then you cross a big bridge over the Mississippi River. There's a single giant casino there, but literally nothing else. Oh dear God. If you thought the Arkansas side was bad, on the Mississippi side, the poverty is clearly on a completely different level. Driving through a town between these desolate and dilapidated farmhouses is just a single abandoned gas station and maybe 3 trailers. That's it. No McDonald's, and not even a working gas station. Eventually you get to the edge of Jackson and hit the interstate. There's still not anything cool there, but at least there is some fast food and you can get gas if you need it. It is a functional city. Not just abjectly impoverished farmland, but dear Lord, rural Mississippi poverty is on another level. Side note, there is a single working gas station that I remember during the Romans stretch. It's not in a town. It's beside the forest where Teddy Roosevelt killed the bear that inspired the teddy bear. It has one of those standing painted wood pictures with cutouts for heads that you stand behind and put your head through for a picture. It's a cool little place. Only 2 seasons, frozen and construction. Seriously though, cliché inbound. I lived in North Dakota for 2 years for oil field work, and I enjoyed it. It was a nice break from the overwhelming hustle and bustle of SoCal. The grasslands were gorgeous, and my only traffic ticket, driving on the wrong side of the road, was $14. In California it would have been 900 plus and points on my license. And everyone I interacted with was so nice. Again, a nice break from the entitled current society in California. As a resident of Olive Branch, Mississippi, I wish I could disagree with the avalanche of Magnolia State hate, but we've got a lot of work to do, and someone has to do it. Maybe I'll come back home after college to help. Fighting the same fight over and over again is draining, and being a vocal, black female in Ms. politics can be dangerous. Let's be positive for a second, though. What I'm proudest of about Ms. is our rich literary tradition. Despite being thought of as completely illiterate and uneducated, Mississippi has produced some fantastic authors. Be positive. Okay, there's this idea of suffering for art, which is terrible but appealing because it seems to hold some truth. Culturally, Mississippi clearly punches above its weight class. The Delta Blues have arguably had more influence on 20th century music than any other genre. Should some form of racial reconciliation emerge in the coming years, Mississippi will be one of the places where it will be most felt, and the stories from there will speak volumes about the nature of America. Everyone loves a redemption story, and a story about the redemption of Mississippi is the story of the redemption of America from its original sin of slavery. Maybe that's it. Mississippi is the epitome of the black and white racial mix in the U.S. Before the Civil War, Mississippi was wealthy because slaves were property and did not count as humans. After, racial tensions basically defined the state. So when there are racial tensions, the state is at war with itself. And America has had very little time in its history when racial tensions were not high. So here we are. Thank God for Mississippi. But we should not forget Reverend King's words about the arc of the moral universe. Reconciliation is coming. And maybe one day when the weight of white supremacy and racism is lightened enough, Mississippi will shine like she properly should. I just wish I could be positive enough to believe that this day will come soon. The best description I've heard about Mississippi is this: Mississippi is a complicated and contradicting state, a strong literary history with a high level of illiteracy, a strong musical heritage with a lack of culture, a strong sense of hospitality while having the dark cloud of racism. We've had plenty of accomplishments to celebrate and plenty of setbacks to be ashamed of. There's gems to be had in the state. You just have to wade through the mud and bugs to find it. For a poor fucked up state, Mississippi has had a huge impact culturally on the world. Musicians like Robert Johnson, Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, Sam Cooke, Bo Diddley, Ike Turner, Elvis Presley, even Britney Spears. Then you have writers like Faulkner, Eudora Welty, Tennessee Williams, John Grisham, actors like Morgan Freeman and James Earl Jones, not to mention Medgar Evers, Oprah Winfrey, and Jim Henson. Mississippi might be poor, but it is a wellspring of musical, literary, culinary, and general cultural talent. Edited typo. Easily Mississippi. It took the state 126 years to get the message that the Confederate flag was definitely offensive. And you know why it changed? Not because as much as a third of the state refused to fly the flag, but because NCAA baseball threatened to never host championships in the state if they had to fly the flag. Sad state to be living in if you ask me. Delaware, why? Seems normal, right? But, and this is completely true, there are fewer human beings in that state than there are incorporated businesses, fewer than 1 million people, more than 1 million business entities. That's fucked, entirely and utterly fucked, and they all incorporate there because Delaware has incredibly favorable liability and privacy laws. Seriously, that state isn't ran by humans for humans, it's literally businesses. Native Mississippian here. And I don't disagree with anyone that it's the worst state. It's almost impossible to defend in any way. We're gerrymandered to shit and our elected officials are truly horrific. Our education system is systematically underfunded and so there's just a complete lack of basic knowledge and critical thinking skills in a large portion of the population. See, vaccination rates. The poverty in the Delta seems impossible in the supposedly richest country in the world. With that being said, I would just encourage people to remember that, like any other place, we're not all hillbillies who put skull on our pancakes and can't read. Case in point, one of the good things about Mississippi is its literary and arts culture. Faulkner, Richard Wright, Margaret Walker, Eudora Welty, Jesmond Ward, Keys Lehman, and many, many others. I think even more importantly, however, is how central Mississippi has been to African American history, and by writing off Mississippi we can tend to forget that. As someone mentioned above, our Civil Rights Museum in Jackson is top-notch. The Ida B. Wells Museum in Holly Springs is another great one. The first African American elected official, Hiram Revels, was elected to the Senate in Mississippi during Reconstruction. James Meredith, who enrolled at the University of Mississippi in 1961, began the desegregation of higher education in the South, and the term Black Power was first uttered in the state, a testament to its many citizens who put their lives on the line for the civil rights movement. It's an extremely complex state that I feel a very conflicted sense of loyalty about. So while I'm not necessarily advocating for anyone to visit, much less move here, if you don't know much about Mississippi history, I would encourage you to seek it out. Also, the food slaps hard. For some reason I went to Alaska for college. Don't ask me why. Just looked beautiful and I had a scholarship, so I figured why not. It was actually really hard to make friends because I was the only out-of-state student, but I had this really hot chem professor named Dr. Lee. She was really young for a professor. I think she went to grad school young, and probably one of those students who were always several grades ahead. But she was one of those new age chicks who wore her hair up in a bun with horn-rimmed glasses and clogs to work every day. She seemed so stylish yet nerdy and intellectual at the same time. I went to every office hours and tried to make sure I was signed up to the smallest lab section I could. It paid off one day when we had lab on Saturday, due to some renovations, and nobody showed up except me. It was a small department, so we didn't have a towel, which meant Dr. Lee was teaching the lab herself. At first it was pretty normal. She just walked me through the basic titration experiment. I was nervous as hell, so my hands kept shaking, but she took it as I was worried about my grade. "Don't stress so much," she said with a laugh. She put her hand on my shoulder and I sort of jumped and felt my heart pounding. "If you make a mistake you can start over. I'm here all day anyway." In fact, I'll be in my office if you need me since you're good enough to work on your own for a bit.